All right, let's jump right in, folks. Today we're going to tackle Exodus chapter 18 and looking at advice from a pretty unlikely place, Moses' father-in-law. So we've got a lot to dig into here, especially if you've ever felt that pressure of leadership or just like overwhelmed by life in general.
Yeah, it's interesting how this chapter, shows us a side of Moses we don't often think about.
Yeah.
You've got this like iconic figure
Yeah.
leading the Israelites through the wilderness after just escaping Egypt, but he runs into a whole new set of problems, ones that even parting the Red Sea couldn't have prepared for.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like going from sprinting to running a marathon, except this marathon involves like building a brand new society.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like they've gone from being captives under Pharaoh to having to figure out their own systems of governing and justice. It's huge.
And then in comes Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. And
Mhm.
he's not just dropping by for a quick hello, he brings Moses' wife and sons along for the trip. So we get this like heartwarming family reunion scene right in the middle of all this huge historical drama.
It really shows how even during these massive historical events, the human stuff is always there, family, relationships, connections. These are important even for someone like Moses.
Yeah.
It's also pretty cool to think about the cultural significance of Jethro. I mean, he's not an Israelite, but he recognizes and praises the God of Israel. It shows how powerful it was to see those miracles during the Exodus firsthand.
Yeah, I can almost picture Jethro thinking, all right, I get it now. This God's the real deal. But then Jethro sees something else, something not so miraculous. Moses is drowning in work. Every day, from morning to night, he's the judge and jury and everything in between for every little dispute among the Israelites.
Just think about that for a second. Every little argument, every disagreement about their animals, every fight about land boundaries, it all landed on Moses. So Jethro sees this and steps in to give him some tough love, pointing out that this isn't just inefficient, it's unsustainable. Basically, he tells Moses, look, you're going to burn out. And honestly, this isn't even helping the people.
Yeah, it's like classic burnout in action. Even Moses, the guy who talked to God on a mountain, wasn't immune to taking on too much. I think we've all been there, right? Feeling stretched too thin, like the weight of the world's on your shoulders.
Totally. And Jethro, even though he wasn't part of the Israelite community, he sees the situation really clearly. He's not blinded by Moses' leadership. He sees a friend, a son-in-law, a leader heading straight for a breakdown. And this is where things get really interesting. He doesn't just sympathize. He offers a solution.
Right, so what's the secret? What does Jethro suggest to fix this leadership traffic jam?
He suggests something pretty radical for the time delegation, and not just handing off a few tasks here and there, but creating a whole system of shared leadership. He tells Moses to choose capable, trustworthy people to act as judges over smaller groups, like rulers of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They would handle the everyday disagreements, leaving Moses free to focus on the bigger issues and cases that needed his authority.
Wow, that's a pretty complex organization for what was basically a nomadic society, right? It's like he's setting up a whole court system.
It is remarkable, isn't it? You can see parts of this hierarchy even in today's organizations. And it makes you wonder, was this kind of structure common in other societies back then? Or was Jethro suggesting something totally new? Well, it's tough to say for sure, but what's obvious is that Jethro's advice wasn't just about, practical management stuff. He wasn't just saying, hey, Moses, go find some competent people and dump the work on them.
Yeah.
He was really specific about what these leaders should be like. He said to pick able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness.
Right, there's that phrase, fear God. It might sound a little outdated, even kind of scary to people today. So let's break that down a bit. What did Jethro mean by that, especially for leaders, and how can we understand it today?
That's a great question, and people have been debating it for ages. On one hand, it definitely means having reverence, knowing there's something bigger than yourself out there. But it's more than just blindly obeying or fearing punishment. It's about recognizing a moral and ethical framework that goes beyond human laws and social rules.
So it's less about trembling before an angry God and more about aligning yourself with a higher purpose.
Exactly. It's like an internal compass guiding you to make decisions that aren't just easy or selfish, but based on justice, fairness, and compassion. It's being accountable to something beyond just what other people think.
That's interesting. It shifts the focus from external authority to internal accountability. So these leaders that Moses chose weren't just supposed to be good at administration, they were supposed to embody these values, this way of being in the world reflecting this fear God idea.
Right. And when we look at the bigger picture, it raises some big questions for us today, too. What qualities do we want in our own leaders? Do we just want people who, get things done? Or are we also looking for people with integrity, humility, and commitment to something beyond themselves?
That's something we all need to wrestle with, both in the leaders we choose and in the kind of leadership we show in our own lives. It's easy to get caught up in success and efficiency and achievement, but Jethro reminds us that real leadership needs something deeper, a moral and ethical base for every decision we make.
And that brings us to another interesting point, that covetousness thing Jethro warned about.
Yeah.
What do you think he meant by that? And how does it fit into this whole leadership picture?
Yeah, covetousness, not a word we use every day, kind of old-fashioned, but I bet it's something we still struggle with in different ways.
Oh, absolutely. At its core, covetousness is this insatiable desire for more power, more stuff, more recognition. It's always craving, never having enough. And for a leader, that's dangerous because it can easily lead to corruption, abusing power, and not caring about other people.
So it's not just about wanting a lot of material things. It's this deeper attitude of wanting what you don't have, always reaching for more, even if it hurts others.
Precisely. And this is where Jethro's wisdom really shines. He understood that real leadership needs a certain level of contentment, being grateful for what you have and focusing on serving others instead of just grabbing power or possessions for yourself.
It's like he's predicting the problems that come with leadership, the temptations that come with authority. And he's giving Moses the kind of protection values that can guard against those temptations, to make sure power is used for good instead of selfish gain.
It's a powerful reminder for us today, especially in a world that often celebrates ambition, competition, and this constant push for more. Jethro challenges us to think about a different kind of leadership, one that's grounded in humility, service, and recognizing that we're all connected.
This makes me think about that hierarchical structure Jethro suggested. You said before that it kind of reflects how some organizations are set up today. But does this ancient model still work in the modern world? Are there problems with this top-down approach? And how can we adapt those ideas of delegation and shared leadership to different situations?
Those are all really important questions. The idea of spreading out leadership and giving people more power is still relevant. But that rigid hierarchy Jethro described might not work perfectly for every organization today.
Right, because we live in a world that values collaboration and flatter organizational structures, empowering people at all levels.
Exactly. If we just copy that hierarchical system, it could stifle innovation, limit creative problem solving, and fail to tap into all the different talents of a team. The key is to take the principles behind Jethro's advice delegation, empowering capable people, clear communication, and adapt them to the specific needs and culture of an organization.
So it's not about the specific structure, but more about the core ideas of shared leadership and responsibility. But here's what I find really interesting. Moses actually listened to Jethro. He didn't just brush off his father-in-law's advice as old-fashioned or irrelevant. He took it seriously and put this new system into practice. It shows a level of humility that's amazing, especially for someone in his position.
It really does show a depth of character that we often miss. Moses, with all his achievements and talking directly to God, shows incredible humility. He knows his limits, he knows he needs help, and he's willing to change his approach based on wise advice.
It's like a paradox, isn't it? The leader who's willing to give up some control to share responsibility actually becomes a more effective and impactful leader.
Exactly. It challenges that traditional idea of leadership being all about power and control. Jethro's advice, and Moses' willingness to follow it, suggests that real leadership involved empowering others, encouraging collaboration, and realizing that no one person has all the answers.
It reminds me of that quote. I think it's from Lao Tzu. A leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say. We did it ourselves.
That's beautiful, and it really captures what Jethro was trying to teach Moses. It's about creating a system, a culture, an environment where everyone can contribute, where leadership is shared, and where success is a team effort, not a one-man show.
So it's not just about delegating tasks to lighten your own workload. It's about helping people feel ownership and empowerment.
Absolutely. And it requires a change in mindset. Instead of seeing leadership as being in charge, it becomes about serving others, helping people reach their potential, and creating a space where collective wisdom and shared responsibility can thrive.
So the question is, how do we apply these ancient principles to our own lives? We might not be leading the Israelites through the wilderness, but we all have challenges, make decisions, and interact with others in ways that need leadership, whether it's at work, in our families, or even within ourselves.
It starts with recognizing the Jethros in our own lives. Who are the people whose wisdom we trust? Who are the ones who can give us a different point of view, challenge our assumptions, and help us see the big picture when we're stuck in the daily grind.
And it's about really listening to those people. Even when what they're saying is hard to hear, challenges our ego, or means we need to change our ways.
It's about being humble, being willing to learn, and being open to feedback, even if it comes from someone we don't expect. It's about understanding that leadership isn't a fixed point. It's a constant journey of growing, adapting, and working together.
This has been such an insightful look at a story that often gets overlooked. We've dug into the details of delegation, the importance of ethical leadership, and the power of seeking and taking wise counsel.
And ultimately, it reminds us that real leadership isn't about titles or positions, but about how we live in the world, how we empower others, and how we try to create a more just, compassionate, and sustainable future for everyone.
We've been talking about Moses taking Jethro's advice, but it's kind of easy to just skim over that part, Like, oh yeah, sure, he listened and then everything was great. But wait a minute. This is Moses. He could have easily held on to his power, ignored Jethro because he was an outsider, or just insisted on doing things his own way. So what's going on here? What makes him change?
It really shows a depth of character that often gets missed. Moses, despite all he accomplished in talking to God directly, he shows real humility. He recognizes that he has limits, that he needs support, and that sometimes the best thing to do is to change how he's doing things, especially based on good advice.
It's almost like a contradiction, right? The leader who's willing to give up some control to share responsibility actually becomes a stronger and more effective leader.
Exactly. It challenges that old school idea that leadership is just about power
Mm.
and being in charge. Jethro's advice, and Moses actually taking it, shows that real leadership is about empowering others, working together, and realizing that no one person have all the answers.
It reminds me of that quote, I think it was Lao Tzu who said it. A leader is best when people barely know he exists, when his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves.
That's a beautiful quote, and it really gets to the heart of what Jethro was trying to teach Moses. It's about building a system, a culture, where everyone can contribute, where leadership is spread out, and success is a team effort, not a one-man show.
So it's not just about handing off tasks to make your own life easier, it's about helping the people you lead feel like they own it and have the power to make things happen.
Absolutely. And it takes a change in how you think. Instead of seeing leadership as being the boss, it becomes about serving others, helping them reach their full potential, and creating a space where everyone's wisdom and shared responsibility can thrive.
That makes me wonder, how do we apply these ancient ideas to our lives today? We might not be leading the Israelites through the desert, but we all face challenges, make decisions, and interact with others in ways that require leadership, whether it's at work, in our families, or even just with ourselves.
It starts by recognizing the Jethros in our own lives. Who are the people we trust for their wisdom? Who are the ones who can give us a new perspective, challenge our assumptions, and help us see the bigger picture when we're stuck in the daily grind?
And it's about really being open to what those people have to say. Even when it's hard to hear, when it challenges our ego, or when it means we have to change what we're doing.
It's about being humble, being willing to learn, and being open to feedback, even when it comes from someone we least expect. It's about understanding that leadership isn't a fixed destination. It's a continuous journey of growing, adapting, and working together.
This has been a truly insightful look at a story that often gets overlooked. We've dug into the nuances of delegation, the importance of leading with integrity, and the power of seeking and accepting wise counsel.
And at the end of the day, it reminds us that real leadership isn't about titles or positions, but about how we live our lives, how we empower others, and how we work towards creating a more just, compassionate, and sustainable future for everyone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's all take a moment to think about the Jethros in our own lives, and let's consider how we can embody those same qualities of wisdom, courage, and compassion in our own leadership journeys. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating exploration.